Good evening, August 16th, and I think that's going to be my last video before I wrap it up for the election for the primaries. Anyway, I just thought I'd kind of run through where we're at. So no video clips, not going to feed any of that thing in, just going to go through some notes I wrote. First thing I'll start out is with the sheriff's race. Obviously you can't vote for me in the primary. I'm voting for Murray. But here's my problem with the sheriff. He's been there 16 years. It's too long. The sheriff was one of the people who supported the 1% sales tax, and the sheriff's budget has grown immensely. And I really have a problem with that because the service isn't any better than when I was here, when I moved here a long time ago. Yeah, there's more people. There's more people there's more cops, and the sheriff's office is bigger, but there's also a hell of a lot more people. And we're paying a hell of a lot more tax than we used to. Really, I'm not getting any different service. He's been caught in a bunch of lies over the house party, what he knew about the Voss lawsuit, the nepotism that when he had Corey Godwin. I noticed, Mikey, that you have a sworn officer running the jail, like has always been, except for the one time you hired your friend Corey Godwin, who was 16 years unqualified. That just really is unacceptable what happened in the Bradley case. He changed the story there a couple of times. And, all Mike's money is coming from out of town. He's selling the brand. I don't know. I understand the tourism brand, the beaches of South Walton. I understand what kind of growth that brought to us. Now, more growth than we could actually control. But why do we need to sell the sheriff's brand? It seems to me we've just become a function for trying to sell Mikey to Tallahassee and throughout the state. And I don't think the numbers are going to add up to what Mikey thinks they are. And I just don't think, I think it's a little ridiculous that sheriff's raising, was he over 200 and some thousand is what I heard. I haven't looked, honestly. But now I find out he sponsored a golf course tournament at the county golf course, and they had it pasted all over the public websites. And his old minion, Corey Godwin, the guy that was uncurrent, the only jail director that wasn't a sworn officer, Mikey's buddy, he's over there saying that Mikey's run for re-election and the 100-year anniversary of the golf party, people sent me texts, are kind of synonymous. That's a county golf course. And why is he sponsoring golf events instead of telling us why shouldn't he have sponsored a real debate where we all ask questions? Here's the kind of debate I want. I want 20 minutes of being asked questions by Mike. And then I want 20 minutes of asking Mike questions. How about that? That would be good. I think it would have been great to see Murray ask questions of Mike for 20 minutes and for Mike to ask questions of Murray. I think that would have been awesome. Now that's what a debate would be, to see what's inside the minds, but we don't do that. We sponsor golf courses. There's some kind of discrepancy over Aliquot. And don't get me wrong, Aliquot is an awesome thing. But all we can do, the people who sent me the information, is when you look at the sheriff's reporting, he says he got $1,000 from a 501c nonprofit. That's exactly what the sheriff's paperwork said. And then not until the day after somebody told me they had filed a complaint, did paperwork get filed that said something else happened. So you be the judge. I'll wait to see all the documents. Nobody was throwing off on Aliquot and what good it does for the county, but let's just think about it. Don't you think the sheriff ought to be looking at all that money coming in and making sure after he's run for office 5 times that he's not doing something that the IRS doesn't allow? Why'd it have to be caught by somebody else? Which tells you Mikey's spending too much time on selling his brand and not enough time on just being the sheriff and knowing what the laws are. So his budget's huge. He's missing 40 some people by his own admittance right now. Mikey, are you going to return that money back to the county, or are you going to put more decals and hold big events that are really just sponsored by taxpayers' money to build a name and a brand for the Walton County Sheriff's Office? And his PIO goes out and she actually has seminars on building the brand. I don't know. Mikey must have got lost at a TDC event or something. His donations from Davie County and lawyers. Right now, Mike says he's going to send an investigator to me. But some of the people that donated to Mike are some of the people I need investigated. I just don't even know how that's going to work out, but I'll keep you updated on it. I'm going to tell you, when I moved here, I never saw very many illegal immigrants. And as Mike said, I've been your sheriff for 16 years. Well, Mike, in 16 years, we now have a significant illegal immigrant problem that Trump said's killing this country. Mike, you just basically, it's all been created on your watch. And that's something your PIO never talks about. I mean, how much is it costing the county of Walton to keep this up? No wonder the healthcare system's failing and they're coming to the BCC. If you voters out there don't think that this is affecting you, this is why they want to borrow money for ball fields and stuff, because they're not doing it. It would be unpopular if Mike did that with developers and stuff, and that's who's funding his campaign. It's just not right. He's been uninvolved in the planning process of road expansion and where they're going for schools, and he's sitting here talking about how bad it is and how hard it is to integrate some of these schools and traffic patterns and safety in the morning. Well, Mike, that's because you're in a reactive mode, just like Walton County Code Enforcement. You're not doing anything about it, and you and Russell Hughes didn't ever even come before the board to talk about schools and roads and stuff until this past fall when you knew you might have to run for re-election. Never seen you at meetings talking about the planning process or how the sheriffs could be involved or things the BCC was about to do that would be very hard. Not until CU came up, which you handled it differently from the other counties, and our county had the most problems with it, and still is, while the other counties to our east and west don't have near the issues that Walton County has with enforcement and what it's done to divide the community. I think the sheriff's been a politician in this, and once again, this political position and building a brand, and we need to focus back on the fiscal responsibility, policing the county, enforcing the rules, and being the sheriff and being good cops. Oh, like I said, all this money from Davie County and all this, I just don't understand it. So that's about the sheriff's race. Let's go into Nick. If Nick gets reelected, we'll be the laughing stock of the Panhandle. At some point, some people will cheer and go, "We told you, we told you." That'll be a shallow, quick victory. These news articles about that, the news articles that'll come out if Nick is reelected will resonate through the South saying racist reelected. Now, Nick has an active ethics complaint, and it's for about carrying the naked girl and trying to cover all that up and the racist text. And so does Tony Anderson. And Tony and Nick's stories don't match. Nick says he was hacked. Tony said he reported properly. What, you reported a hacked text, Tony? That doesn't make. And you reported to somebody in the email chain. Does that make sense? And supposedly Tony said the other day that Sydney Noyes was his attorney. Well, she works for the clerk of court. I guess she's in private practice too. And she's in some of the texts that are in some of the complaints. How does that work? And so, I mean, you can't make this stuff up of what's been going on. So he says his testimony is that he's got his ethics complaint. Nick was a huge supporter of the tax, and he also signed to settle CU. And if you go watch his video on my channel, he'll say he'll throw people off his beach if he wants to. That's how he feels about private property. So he says one thing in his ads, but go listen to his deposition. Do you trust a guy that would hand off a naked woman to the attorney and make up a story? Yeah, me neither. I wouldn't trust him either. And Nick, one of his crown accomplishments was bringing Scott Brannon back to the county and bringing Clay in as our interim 90-day for 3.5-year attorney. And last year for the bargain price of what? Almost $900,000 a year for our temporary attorney that's Trey's buddy. God. Yeah. And Trey, why don't you just come out and apologize over those texts? Tony says they're there. The court case says they're there. You're the only one left saying they're not there. Don't you think you ought to apologize to people? Because I guess you say whatever you want in your private life. And do whatever kind of sexual escapades you want. But when you sit in the public's chair on the public's dime and you do wrong, you've got to tell the public you're sorry. And you just didn't do that. I don't know. You know, Trey, one of the first things I remember that you did when you became a commissioner is you tried to hoodoo Tony Anderson and the county into buying some land right next to your restaurant. You remember when that made the newspaper? And you suddenly wanted to build a boat ramp right next to a public boat ramp right next to your restaurant, like you were, and you didn't recuse yourself from it. We let you have a pass, but we should have wrote an ethics complaint on that. You were all in that. And Tony Anderson caught you in it, and that's all on video. Trey, you think being a commissioner is a game, and as you told somebody, but I like being commissioner. Well, that's not a good reason to be commissioner, and serving the people is a privilege that you have abused. Like I said, Nick's supported that. Nick's been an embarrassment over some of these lawsuits and stuff, the firing of Quinn Robertson, Barker quit. Now Nick's family got this property, and while Nick was in office, and it was worth $1.6 million on the tax rolls, and they bought it for $300, and Clay's the neighbor, and Nick recused himself, but Clay did, and you just, come on, people, this is our tax money. So let's go on to Chuck. Nobody's ever seen Chuck at a meeting until this, except that Chuck ran Boots' campaign. And Chuck is kin to Boots, and you know how the family trees work around here. And that's another thing. If you're a newcomer, some of these people like Atkinson, his family's probably been in the charge of the sheriff's department for probably 70 of the last 80 years. Somebody from his lineage. I think it's time for a little bit of stirring of the DNA. Chuck's never, like I said, he's never been involved until he was a candidate. And Chuck, honestly, he didn't, no matter what he says about making payments, he never addressed the issue of whether he paid back the internet money from the company he collapsed and there was a judgment against him. And yeah, I get it, Chuck, if you made a couple of mistakes, but for 19 years of tax liens, you could not manage your money. And now you say you're on a payment plan, but you stand up at these meetings and freely brag about your success and your multiple properties that you own. I wouldn't brag to anybody if I was still writing the government on payments for money I already owed them. And what kind of business sense do you have to get on the, if you're so successful, why not borrow the money at a low interest rate? Because the IRS is not cheap when they give payments, are they, Chuck? I heard their penalties were huge. So your business sense, no matter what you say about finally knocking it out of the park, to use your own words, after so many failures, man, our BCC's in too bad a shape to give it over to somebody with that kind of track record. And your relationships with Trey and Nick and the sheriff, and truthfully, you and the sheriff were embarrassing. You and the sheriff showed up with the same people in Mossy Head that y'all showed up in Red Bay with, and you showed up at Hammock Bay. It was like it was an act of intimidation that the sheriff's employees showed up in the communities that most of them did not live with at all the events. So it would look like that community was supporting Wilder and the sheriff. I think what the sheriff did, because most of them were his senior employees and donators to his campaign, and he took them or organized them, or they all organized themselves to go from debate to debate. It was done as an act of intimidation because the sheriff had the money to deck everybody out in the uniforms so they looked like the masses. Remember, propaganda is making something appear to be the way it really isn't. But I think the people that lived in that community were unnerved by the green wall that lined the back of the room and the white wall to the left. And then Nick showed up and realized there was questions from the audience, and he disappeared. And Tony Anderson was only a few miles when he got out of the BCC meeting, and he didn't come either. You just can't make that up. Chuck knew he wasn't allowed to be on the planning board for Boots' district because he was Boots' cousin. He knew it. It was all over the internet. He still tells me not to say anything about him, and people saying things about him, he's tired of hearing it. Well, he said stuff about me and never said he was wrong on the internet when he was Boots' campaign manager. But he knew he wasn't allowed to be on the planning board. And I've got the minutes where he shows up. And go watch the Lucky Chucky show on the Alan Osborne. Click on videos and go down there till you find the Chucky doll. And there's footage of Chuck coming and refusing to leave the meeting, although they've told him, what you're doing is not allowed. And I've got the text between Sidney and Scott Brannon to prove that they knew it. Chuck knew it. Another thing, Chuck's running around in Mikey's group. He's another product of the Walton County Sheriff's Office. That's where he used to work. Now, we've not had a great success with deputies as commissioners. Glidewell, Boots got himself in trouble up there. Barker quit. Stan's the next deputy up there, so we got all the deputies we need that's not leaving the board because our administrator's the next deputy. And so here we got somebody else that's a product of the sheriff's office. I think we need something different, and I think everybody is ready for it. That didn't work out so well with us to have all those people up there, did it? I don't think it did. And here's one of the big things. Never forget that Chuck was proud to have Chaz Galloway when he came out on his campaign and paid him money. And Chuck brought lots of his own money to the campaign, which is hard to believe if you can't pay the IRS, but you can fund a lot of money in your own campaign. I don't know. And like I said, he aligned himself with Chaz Galloway. So what does that say for Chuck's judgment? What does it say? He still hadn't come out. Chuck's never come out and denounced what Nick did. He just says, I don't support racism. Won't you come out and say what Trey Nick did and Tony Anderson tried to cover up was not what I would want in a commissioner. But Chuck can't say that because he's running around with those two guys campaigning with him. So he can't say it. He can say whatever he wants in print. I don't support any kind of discrimination. Really? Well, you're running around with the people who did it and the people who covered it up. That's how I see it. And so, let's see if there's anything else here. I think that's enough. He's a product of Chuck has way too many business conflicts and way too many roots to things that are involved in the county to be objective on things. And it's going to be a constant problem if he's on the board because of his... and Chuck used to vote as a Democrat. And that's pretty bad. And he's getting Joe Johnson and them to write bad articles about Barbara Morano. That's because Joe Johnson's scared after 30 years he'll get put off the variance board, which is kind, in my opinion, to Joe's pockets and what he does. So, and then we move on to Tony. I think that's enough on Chuck. Tony, Chuck, and Trey campaign together. So Tony's openly had Chaz involved in him. We know that Tony doesn't jump but so high unless Lloyd Blue and Gary Shipman and those people tell him to. Look, Tony's skills, watch this. This is a mailbox. These are his skills. Open, close, mail in, mail out. That's what we got. We need more than that. Barbara is a retired principal. She participates without being paid. Tony's another person that nobody saw him at a BCC meeting until he ran for office. He answers to the good old boys. He helped cover up the text, and the only people he reported it to were the people who were already involved in the text. He never told us about his naked employee being passed around. He couldn't because it was related to one of his biggest supporters. Tony also has taken all this money out of Davie County. And it's about his connections. We've got proof that people wrote Tony in his district, and he owns no property in the district he's in whatsoever, and never has. I don't trust $20 billion worth of property for a guy that comes down there and spends all that time, now 8 years, and still couldn't see enough to invest down there. He would have made real money. It doesn't make sense to have Tony there. He's allowed bay pollution. He supported changing the definition of Sandestin's open space, thereby lowering the residents' quality of life by allowing the developer to count the roads as somewhere you ought to be able to play and recreate. Who wants to recreate in the middle of the road? in Sandestin in the summertime with thousands of drunk rental people on private roads. Do you think that was the intent of the development order, to grow up, save you money, work hard, go by in Sandestin, play in the middle of the road? How about swim in the polluted bay? Tony has been the supporter of Mac Carpenter, even when Mac has been caught. He didn't want Mac fired. He didn't want anything happening to Mac, even though Mac lost his license for real estate, yet he sits as the planning director. Tony is a huge 1% sales tax supporter and wanted us all to go in debt $30, $40 million at a time, instead of trying to look around the county and cut waste like in the sheriff's department and other places, and maybe not getting in so many lawsuits, Tony, and holding developers responsible for the damage they do. But Tony doesn't do that. Recently, despite Tony knowing that they'd paid Clay almost $900,000 in a single calendar year, he voted not to fire Clay. And then he lied about approaching another law firm and got caught at the last BCC meeting, among a couple of lies that he's made. He treats people different at meetings. You go look at the last BCC meeting. Some people can ask questions and talk and use their whole 3 minutes, and some people can't. The litigation matrix has never been bigger. And Tony sits up there and says, well, sometimes, I'm moving a little slow because I'm eating THC chocolate. Well, Tony, we don't need you stoned up there. We need a commissioner that knows what's going on, is not controlled by lawyers. We don't need a puppet. Like I said, he won't do anything about the 40 years. And Tony's settled the CU case. He told you he was going to fight for it. Now he's telling you he's going to fight for it again. But Tony's one of the people that admitted in that video that they knew the judges told them that they were going to lose. So Tony, why did y'all lie to the public? Why'd you mislead us if you knew? Why'd you spend all that money and then keep rezoning property for short-term rentals and you knew you had no beach access? And then you lied about that. Why? You can't trust Tony. All he does is sit up there in that chair and swivel. It's phony Tony. And he was tied in with the Chaz campaign. I'm telling you, Tony and Trey and all that mess is just bringing discredit to this county, which is not good for any of our investments or our quality of life. We need to change the board. The only person that's really new on the board is Brad Drake, because he had to step in to clean up Barker's mess, and he's been doing a fine job. All the rest of the candidates up for voting that have already been on the board, the sheriff, Tony, and Boots, I'm sorry, I'd pick you over Trey, but Trey don't need to be on that board. We need the whole board change out. We need a fresh start. This board is just too conflicted to accomplish anything about doing things, because some of the board members voted to hire an EDA director who didn't meet minimum education requirements. We have a problem in this county of hiring people who are either not current, not qualified, or don't meet the minimums because somehow they have the right DNA to the elected and the connected. And that's how it is on the Alan Osborne Show. I'm tired, I'm pissed off. And I just wanted to go through the run-through of that. So there's Chuck, Tony, Trey, and the sheriff, and why you shouldn't vote for them. And I hope you will vote in the primary tomorrow for Greger, Murray, Marano, Drake, and Curry. And if you can't vote for Curry, don't vote for Nick, vote for Boots. Anyway, I'm Alan Osborne, and you can't make this shit up. Until next time, y'all keep them straight out there. And please show up. No matter who you're voting, get some people and go vote. Can we not have a goal that 50% of us care enough to go exercise our constitutional right and vote? Please take somebody, set an example for children, tell children it's important, or one day they won't have a country. I'm Alan Osborne. See you next time.